This particular presentation is showing the multidimensional nature of experiences in a way that is connected to many of those that have past life connections to their present life now, that I've discovered through doing regressions with different people, how there's a real connection. Not just when I do regressions where someone has a phobia that they can't understand, that may very well be related to an origin in another lifetime. This is to do primarily with what's happening now, which is really, really relevant, and how we are starting to fully understand our soul connection to many of the intelligences that we are communicating with, which I think is really important. So we're talking about healing, advanced technologies gifted from the star ancestors who are present amongst us through the Sasquatch connection, the awakening of human consciousness that connects to our star ancestors. So let's take it from there. So we're talking about star seeds, whatever name you want to give to yourself or any others that are having encounters. There are many forms of non-human intelligences. Knowing that you're not from here or connected to those star systems is becoming more and more commonplace as a pattern to this experience. Feeling that connection to other planets and other life forms. And one of the things that I work with is when people in an altered state will say that they feel connected to not just planets in this galaxy or whatever, but other dimensions. There's healing by non-human intelligences that I'm going to cover briefly. Awakening to higher consciousness activated by this multidimensional awareness that I'm discovering more and more, that those that are literally shifting to a whole new level of consciousness and have done in the last, in the recent years of their life. They may find some from 2012, interestingly, and not surprisingly, but also even in the last couple of years, particularly because I think of the crisis that we're facing on this planet. Many are taught by visits to space school. There are downloads, of course, of the scripts, the symbols, the languages, etc. There's telepathic communication, the downloads of new technologies, and I'm going to look into that through this presentation. And also being part of a team on board craft and shown how to fly the craft. So let's take it to another level. One of the interesting accounts that I came to when I wrote The New Human was a young man who, his whole family were experiencers. But what was interesting with this young man was he remembers from the age of 4 having contact with what he believed were soldiers that came into his room at night. And he used to talk with them. He said, I wouldn't go to sleep and would transmit these messages to my family, such as what one soldier was saying to me. I recall they had nails sticking out of them and missing limbs, just like soldiers in a war. But he got scared of these abilities and shut down from them. What was interesting about John's obsession with the military was he didn't understand why. But when researching his family's ancestral links, it connected John to a soldier in his family who died in the First World War. The soldier had the exact birth date as John, exactly 100 years apart. John's regression focused on the soldier who had the same birth date as John, which was connected to his family. He saw himself on a battlefield, recognized that this was his past life as that soldier. He explained that because he'd sent to the war, he hadn't fulfilled his purpose in that life. The war had altered his consciousness, so he had to come back in this present life to complete it. John said they, the beings, knew the war was coming. Although the war could have been stopped, things didn't go to plan. They created a connection to this lifetime so he could do what needs to be done. It's complex and requires complex mathematical equations of being here in the correct timeline. It's mathematical and so complex he can't comprehend. But he was seeing lists, numbers going through his head like the science of numbers, all connected to his personality and consciousness. The reason John reincarnated is that they needed a strong carrier, and even star signs are mathematical in creating stronger links to them as a system they have created to go down a particular path. Even images on his clothing kept him linked to them. He also helps his family with their connection to this. He said the species he comes from are called Zephyrus, and they're seen as healers of the galaxy. But what is even more important here was how that links to his real mission and why he came in and incarnated not just in that life, but this one. So we went to his abilities as a small child to begin with. He would see balls of light before he went to sleep. He started to focus on his art, painting, and began to understand how to communicate with spirits. Studying fine arts, he communicated to them and asked for help. I believe it was Leonardo da Vinci I was communicating with, he said. So I asked, what made you think it was Leonardo? He said, because I was doing a painting which was traditional at the time. I heard a man's voice, very calm, talk to me through a still life picture. I was struggling, as I'm naturally an abstract painter. Hard to explain, but he'd talk to me and tell me to put some paint in a spot or a particular brush stroke. Did he introduce himself to you as Leonardo? Yes, John said. He said that's who he was. One day I was experimenting painting this image, and it fell off the wall and a voice said, leave it there. And I started painting a cosmic, other dimensional kind of painting, like a surrealistic painting, but more abstract, just like another world. They feel real to me. I'm escaping into another world. Although I feel I'm creating another world, it feels like it really exists. And this is the interesting thing about the artwork, and how we've mentioned before, and I've mentioned before, how many artists are bringing in information in scripts and language, in the images of beings, other landscapes. There are many, many artists now tuning in to their origins. This is how it was for John in the regression. John felt he was in a metal shuttle-like ball craft. It felt familiar. They're expecting him and going towards a golden light to a meeting with them. They were tall and skinny with big eyes, big head, long face, blue skin. The being knows him but calls him by another name. John calls these beings both family and colleagues, and their star origin is Syracuse, located in another dimension. John describes 2 points which look like spider webs and says that one travels through it to the other side. He travels to that point and it spits him out into another dimension. He describes it as dimensional travel. He says he's there for a briefing about what needs to be done, and it relates to his painting, which is maps to help the human world, and they need to know them. John felt the maps help them and also humans. It helps them to come here to contact us and helps us to contact them. He's the middleman of the 2 dimensions. The artwork can create a portal, but it also opens people up to an understanding of dimensional space. The colors are important because it creates the right colors for that energy. John said they often take him up to a craft at night, and it's very intense. He has a fear of heights or falling off the edge, were related, he says, to when he was a small child traveling through dimensions. So there is the origin of one of his phobias right there. So the bottom line with that story is that John now is writing and drawing particularly images that he said activate our perceptions into a more multidimensional understanding. So basically we are activated or triggered by the information that he produces through his artwork. And this is another aspect, I think, of how we need to understand the downloads of artwork from those that are having experiences. But I'm taking you here to one that I wasn't sure to bring in, but I think it's relevant in the sense that this woman was activated to her non-human team, if you like, through a healing that she did with a lady. She wrote to me and said she was a healer. She worked with energy. And she explained to me that she'd been doing that for a long, long time. But what was interesting about this was she'd never connected anything to non-human intelligences. She said she saw spirits. She'd been taken to different dimensions. She could get information from a photograph. She could heal remotely. She said that her connection was to what she called her guardian angel team. She experienced both clairaudience and clairsentience. But what's interesting here is that when she contacted me, it was because of this being that appeared to her when she was trying to do a healing. And this is her story. She said as a medium, she was aware of lives on other planets. But what happened in the last 3 days shocked her. Never in a million years believed that me or my child would have contact with ETs. I believed they existed, but paid no attention. This is completely new to her. What happened blew her mind. Her friend's mother had been inserted with a product drug, and I'll leave you to work out what that particular drug is, and is now experiencing health problems, abdominal pain. She was asked by this lady if she could help remotely, as they lived in two different countries. She tried to contact with her energy, but when she approached, got hit by a huge block or a shield that blocked her from her. So kept trying. Any energy when trying to was sent back. So what she did, she asked Source for more energy, as this energy is the strongest energy in the universe. When hit with the shield, this energy broke down. I saw something in her abdomen. It was a black ball with red sticks coming out of it. It looked like a cancer cell, she said, but I knew it wasn't a normal cancer cell. I tried to send light and it was bouncing back. So this is the interesting crux of this. And I would like to mention how I feel this is really important with things that are going on at the planet right now, and many people with health problems. She said an alien was standing in front of me with my patient in their arms. So when she couldn't send any energy, she was feeling helpless. So she asked for help, and within seconds, this ET was standing in front of her with her patient in their arms. He took her and the patient somewhere, a spacecraft, and gave her to others to heal her. She said, I couldn't see them, but I felt their energies. I only saw what they took out, something that looked like a long black stick made of metal or something like that. I was then back and was in a position to send light to her. They also sent some colorful light to her. I received an update from my friend's mum, the one that was on the spacecraft with me, with the ETs, where healing her from whatever was inside her body after the product. She woke on the Monday morning saying she was feeling amazing and full of energy. What the purpose of this story is to say that this healer had never connected anything to non-human intelligences prior to this. This was her experience. And since that time, she's now having interactions with these beings. And what it is saying, I think fairly clearly, that these beings are helping with what's going on this planet right now. And I've had other stories similar to this. But this is a particular story where I want to bring in something that is coming to the fore more and more. In our country, in Australia, they're called the Yowie. They're called Bigfoot or Sasquatch in, obviously, the US. And this wonderful gentleman has done a couple of videos to explain how he's connected to the particular Sasquatch he calls RE. And what's interesting is the familiarity and the connection that he feels to these particular beings. And we actually explored that connection. And I want you to hear how he really believes they are star beings, and they come in with exactly the same message that we say from many of the other star systems. And I hope that you can hear from the next video what he's saying. I hope it's clear enough.
I'd like to talk a little bit about my RE picture. I've had a few pictures where the Sasquatch people have shown up in my pictures, never fully materialized, but you know, a half dozen times at least or more, they've shown up in a semi-materialized or partially cloaked state where, to me, it's really, really obvious what I'm looking at. And generally, a lot of people can see what I'm looking at too, although there is a point that if the picture is for you, you at times are able to see it better than others. That's just the way that these magic people work. Now, I don't intentionally go out and try to take pictures of them. And the best way to not have interaction with a Sasquatch is to set up game cams and stuff of that nature. I do take pictures of their glyphs and their structures for teaching purposes. And they are very, very good with that. But once in a while, the Sasquatch people will show up in my pictures. And what I say is, I'm taking pictures. And if you want to show up, feel free. And quite often they do. And it's always a pleasant and beautiful surprise when they do. Now, as far as this particular picture goes, I was driving into my woods one day, and I was just overcome with this strong, beautiful, loving energy. I'm familiar with it. It's an energy that they give you. It's a greeting. But on this particular day, it was so strong. It was like overwhelmed me immediately. I was literally weeping. Tears were rolling down my cheeks. I was actually, I was, no exaggeration. It was that beautiful and strong. And when I felt that, I asked Ari, I said, Ari, come and visit me today. And so I was walking around in one of my favorite areas, an area where I hold my campouts every year, and walking around taking pictures of, you know, every little thing. I take pictures of trees and stumps and mushrooms and, you know, little chipmunks and all kinds of stuff. Just anything that is beautiful and catches my eye. And, you know, so on this particular day, and, you know, I don't even know why I would take a picture of just where he shows up is kind of, how can I explain it? It's not really an area that I would take a picture of. There's nothing outstanding that stands out about it. But then the Sasquatch people are guiding me, and people they work with all the time. And you get to recognize that over time. So I took a picture of this area, go home and put all my pictures on Facebook and share them with everybody. And approximately, I think maybe a week later or shortly thereafter, I didn't even notice anything. But Sue said, Brian, Ari's in your picture. What happened is I asked him to visit. I felt his energy incredibly strong, and sure enough, there he is. And he did visit. He granted me that request. And so that's the story behind this picture. And it's one of my favorites. And I don't know, to me, it's as obvious as, you know, the nose on my face, what I'm looking at. And I hope you guys can see him. And yeah, very grateful, very grateful.
So Brian continues to explain how he communicates in different ways with RE. And it's quite fascinating, the way they communicate, but also his connection, the real connection he feels that he's got with RE.
I would like to give a short synopsis on the Sasquatch people, how they communicate with me, and how they've opened up my awareness. The Sasquatch people communicate in a number of ways. They have a stick language called glyphs. That's one way. And I have learned over the years to actually understand what some of them mean. It's actually personal between you and them. And it's telepathic in nature. So we have that going on, and we exchange messages back and forth. But very much like Star Nations people, I also communicate with them through mind speak, which is sometimes words directly placed in your head. Sometimes a thought placement, where you will have a thought and they will give you an answer immediately. Sometimes they will lead me to different places for discoveries, to find things that they have left for me, to give me answers and to advance my knowing. And this happens so often that eventually you get to see the pattern of it and recognize it for what it is. Probably the most common way for me is that they will give me an energy nudge to let me know that I'm talking about truth, or they approve of what I'm talking about, or approve of who I'm talking with. And it's just an intensified energy that's just a confirmation. What they have shown me and told me is that we are all one and all connected. We are all part of the universal collective. They have taught me about no judgment, which is a really lower vibrational practice. They've taught me to have no fear, which is also a lower vibrational emotion, and actually what keeps us humans in the dire straits and quagmire we are in today is fear. So they've taught me that we're all one, all connected energetically. We're part of the universal collective, like I said. The Sasquatch people have the same identical message as many benevolent Star Nations races, and they work in conjunction with them to deliver this message to us at this pivotal time in our history. And the fact that they are interdimensional, they have the exact same message, and they're here at this precise time, this crucial, pivotal time in our history, to help wake us up so that we can have that conscious shift that people talk about. To me, the conscious shift, and what the Sasquatch are telling me, is all about raising one's vibrations. Because when you raise your vibrations to that fifth dimensional state, there is no war, there is no hate, there is no judgment, there is no fear. And all the things that control us and keep us in this state that we're in now, the state of affairs the world is in, cannot exist in that state. So that to me is the conscious shift. That is, in a nutshell, what the Sasquatch people are all about. And like I said, they are right on board with the benevolent Star Nation races and their message. The biggest lie that has been perpetrated against man throughout our recorded history is the lie of separation. We are all one and all connected. That is the Sasquatch people's message. That is the Star Nations races message. And when we step out of the darkness and realize that we are all one, and separation is a myth, then we will step into our true power.
What I found was such a profound message and understanding. And for Brian saying it beautifully, is how they're all part of this waking and consciousness shift that we're all experiencing. So this is the final little clip that Brian did for me, because this is where we found out why he's so passionate about telling their story.
I'd like to talk a little bit about how my connection with the forest people came about. In 2012, I was walking my dogs on a waterway in my hometown when I got classic mind speak spoken into my head. It was the first time I had ever experienced anything of that nature. And it basically said, go to the mountains. From that point, the connection started happening rapidly. I met a fellow who had experience with Sasquatch in an area right close to my house, and we started going out and had experiences right away, and that was by design. That was why I got called. Once I was there, they started their teachings and reaching out to me. And their teachings are very much in line with Star Nations races as well. All one, all connected, the vibration of love, no judgment, no fear, a very common message shared by many of them. So they visit me, or they teach me through a number of ways. It's all done through energy, mind speak, thought placement, leading me here and there to discover things. They work with me through a stick language called glyphs, which is actually personal to you and them. You come up with the meaning for what it means to you, and then they adopt that meaning, except there's a very small or not so small detail that is really intriguing and unique about that. Sasquatch do not follow 3D linear time, so I have come up with meanings for glyphs or their stick writing, and found out that, oh my God, they knew exactly when I was going to come up with that meaning, and had in fact been communicating with me through that meaning and with that particular glyph years prior. So, you know, once again, the 3D linear understanding of time that we have is not their understanding. Another reason why they connected with me, I think, is because of my open heart, my ability to learn, to pay attention to the small details, and the fact that I have been a Sasquatch in past lives. They've told me that I am family to them and I represent them everywhere I go. And I've come to realize that I'm not only family in the sense that they adopted me in this incarnation into that family group, but they are talking about on the broader perspective of family. How it's changed my life is it's giving me a much broader awareness of our eternal nature, our collective nature. It has put me in that vibration of love, where when I'm at my best, which I'm getting more and more and more in that state as I move on. And, you know, I don't have the hills and valleys as much as I used to. And that state is one of love, no judgment, no fear, and no fear enables us to do our work. So that's a key point here. And when I say us do our work is, you know, many of us have come here at this time to help us transcend into that higher understanding. So that's the work I talked about. So they have changed my life in so many ways. I just have a much deeper understanding of the universal collective and stuff of that nature.
This is what has been quite fascinating for me, is to see the connections through various timelines that we are connected to our mission and our purpose. To give you an example from the children, I think this one is an interesting one, although I'm going to focus on another story shortly. The children that have contacted me through their parents or themselves, if they're teenagers, have often mentioned their past lives. And this one is a particularly interesting one, that this young man explained that this was his first incarnation, that he was a blue being in his past life, and there is the image he drew of himself, and he drew these really interesting symbols which he explained what they were, that this one meant me, this one was his roots, and this the center of the planet. So he said he's a center seed connecting to the center of this planet to help with the pollution. He was again given the ADHD label. He already is aware he's a healer, working on Earth and the grids, opening portals, an empath, awareness of dimensions and timelines, and very aware that his mum came in from many human lifetimes to help him, as it was his very first incarnation. One of the stories here, I've mentioned this young lady, she's older than this now. This was something that I'd done, I had recorded quite a few years ago now, I think probably about 8 years ago, and her connection to Atlantis and also the crystal skulls. But she said, again, she, you know, is mentioning that she's Homo novus, that she's here to help this planet as we shift in consciousness, and the more awakened and activated humans are incarnating right now. And this is how she explains the Atlantis experience.
Things that's really interested me, and I know a lot of people are interested in, is, you know, the crystal skulls that have been surfacing. Now, I know you have a particular interest in the crystal skulls. Could you say why it's important or interesting to you?
Okay. Back in Atlantis, I was a researcher over there, and I was selected at that time for my skull to be scanned for my head and made into like a crystal USB drive, so like a hard drive in a way. And I would be the only one, well, only one who would really tap into it. Of course, there were keepers of the skulls; they could similarly do the same thing, but it was the more generalized. For me, I could tap into my skull, and you know, I could talk to it. You know, it was sentient. It was as if it was talking to another person, really. But it was kind of like a computer in a way. Like you just access information, you download information. When I was working there at the time, the skulls are never kept in the city. That's one thing. Like, we never kept the skulls in the city. We always kept them in places like in vaults, like in certain areas where they would be protected from certain environmental factors, or, you know, sometimes, you know, thieves every now and then, you know. So they just kept them hidden away, protected, you know, from damage and all sorts of things. And I would, like, once I would I'd get a whole bulk of information I've acquired over the month or so. They would bring in my skull, and I would put that in telepathically. I would put that in, you know, through waves of energy into it. That's, you know, to store information. And then actually, yeah, and they would ship it off again a couple of days later or 3 days. So yeah, that's the way it was done with the skull. And I was very happy to learn that skull actually survived, because it felt like, when my death occurred at that time, it felt like for the longest time I felt incredibly depressed, because it felt like that life. This is a human life. This is when I was human.
Can you tell us a little bit, because of Atlantis and your memory of Atlantis, can you tell us how you know, or where you knew it was located, and a little bit more about what happened and what you remember?
It was a continent. The continent was called Atlantis. And it was sitting in the Atlantic Ocean, right between North America and middle of Europe as well. So it was just sitting like, it looked like a cone sort of shape continent, but in the far right corner there was like a massive bay, and then it had like many islands around it, and the biggest one was in the center. During the fourth civilization, because that was the fourth civilization at that time, Atlantis was actually originally just a settlement and eventually grew into a massive city. It was already a huge city when I was born there. It was already like thriving for thousands of years, and it was huge. Like New York has got nothing on Atlantis. I'm sorry, it's just New York is only a fraction of Atlantis. It was huge, and yeah, I was actually working, because the inner city, of course, was on the main island, and you had other islands with the rest of the city, and then you have like all these tubes and like freeways and all sorts of things. The bay will be filled with buildings, and sometimes some buildings will be above water as well. You know, all these artificial structures. And I remember the library was sitting on the bay, was on the coast. And you could actually see like massive like freeways from the library to the inner parts of the city. And actually a week when my crystal skull left, like when it left, when I finally done all the information it went, I was actually ready to go to Egypt, because I was about to go with my associate, my other researcher, like, you know, partner in crime. And we had our bags packed, everything was ready to go. I had a pet bird at the time. She was a very docile little bird. Her name was Agish. And she started to squawk this one particular day. She started to squawk, like she went in absolute sort of like a fit. I've never seen her like that before, and it made me really well. Like, what is going on? And she was picking at me, at my hair, my clothes. She was like, you know, in my face. She was flicking her wings. I'm thinking, like, what is going on with her? Next thing I know, she flies out, and then I can feel like the rumbling of the earth, like the earthquake. I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, okay, maybe she's frightened of the earthquake, whatever. And then I start to see people screaming. I can hear screams from around the building. And I'm thinking, like, okay, this is something quite serious going on. Like, this must be some sort of really terrible earthquake. But there was like an open area outside. There was like I went outside to see, like, because people were running inside the building, trying to get out, trying to get in. And I remember I went outside. There was like this massive plateau, sort of open walking area, and you could see out far into the distance of the ocean, the land, and everything. And you could just see a massive energy wave, like it was huge, like a wall of like this sort of plasma fire, if you will, just coming. And at the same time, it was ripping the earth, like you could feel the force. It was this huge feeling, like it was intense. the whole thing just was ripping the land up. The continent was going to go. Like, you just knew it. And the unfortunate thing is nobody could escape quick enough to get away from, because it was just literally like barely a minute. The whole thing went down. The explosion destroyed all the, you know, the flora, the fauna, people, everything went, like, it was all burnt. Because I remember looking at that wall, like, that was my, like, I'm like, yeah, this is it. This is my death. There's no way I'm going to survive this. And it's just my life slowed down, like, just by a lot. And I could everything. My whole mind literally just chased through the entire, like, my entire life at that time. And it went really, really, really quickly. And then I noticed every little detail I could possibly imagine. And it was as if my soul was literally packing up and ready to go. Like, okay, this is it, gotta go now. And I remember the last memory I ever had, like, a warm feeling, like it was a completely desperate sort of feeling. But in a way, my psyche responded, like, just think of something happen and you'll be fine.
What's interesting about Lee's story and her account, what I noticed more than anything was the absolute credible detail that she had of her own personal experience. And the picture here, which I sent to her some years later, and she said, oh, you've seen some of the power plant of Atlantis that she recognized as well. But what was fascinating too is the way that she interacted with her own crystal skull, something that I actually understand more personally as well. But the reason I brought in Atlantis is because it's very relevant to the next account, which I would like to now go into. But before I do, I just wanted to mention something to rattle the cage a little bit, because we're always talking about past lives, whether they're past or all part of our real, you know, ourselves in how we understand time as not being linear. Only recently, a 7-year-old young boy, I'll call James, told me, or told his parents, that he was a time traveler. And he said this: I'm a time traveler from the future, and my real form is not this one I have now. I am genderless in that form. Terms and concepts his mother had no idea James knew. He said his alien form is really us from the future. They are us and we are them. He said he had no nails and 4 fingers, and he was shown things times like the dinosaurs, at the time of the dinosaurs, and future times. And I want to put that in because I think we really have to understand a little bit more that the way we see things as linear may not in fact be true reality, which I'm sure many of you listening to this may already understand. Now this is really connecting the dots from past lives to present lives to where is it taking us, and I feel is really relevant right now, given the way our world is in chaos in many ways. So this is a wonderful lady called Beth. This was her experience that she initially told me about, but it was opening another hidden door to a recall of a past life and a hidden message. It was a summer night in 1989, 2 o'clock in the morning. She was in bed. She saw what she thought was a light from a helicopter coming through her window and shining on her. The light grew brighter. She jumped out of bed and ran a few feet down the hallway. The light remained on her, even through the walls. She said she stopped, and in her head, a voice said, "We need you to come with us, but we won't take you unless you say okay." She consented, and she wasn't feeling afraid. She was brought to a small ship. Sitting in a chair next to the right of her was a happy-looking small whitish grey being wearing a whitish silver jumpsuit. The being didn't look at her. He was focused on piloting the spacecraft. The window was in front of her. She looked to his left, and there was her friend Frank. And he leaned forward, smiling at her, and shouted as he was pumping his fist, "This is awesome." So he was very, very excited by this experience. She recognized some of her other friends on board the spacecraft. She said the ship landed on a port inside a much larger craft. They walked into a room that was blinding white. Her eyes needed to adjust. The walls, ceiling, floor, and table were all glowing white. The light was coming from them. Inside the room were 7 other people that she knew and 4 taller beings. She said, Frank and I walked into the room together, and I said, "Where are the light bulbs?" Which I think they thought, these beings thought was quite humorous. Her other friend was laying on a white table, the tall being who had the light white skin, no hair, large eyes, and a robe that was flowing silvery material with a high collar, long sleeves, was waving a cloth similar to material over her body. First counterclockwise, then clockwise. The other beings were speaking with my friends telepathically. She took her turn to lay on the table. The being had so much love, she said, peace and wisdom, and did the same sort of scan over me with the cloth, she said. I got up and walked over to another one of the beings. They were all taller and had their robes on, and he wanted to show me something, she said. The wall turned into a window, and we looked down. It revealed a waterfall and a garden of beautiful flowers. There was a path that the shorter beings, same as the driver on the small ship, driving what looked like a golf cart. I asked the being about the flowers. Telepathically, he said, "We collect beautiful things and bring them to other worlds." Now that is important because I'll show you why in a minute. I asked, who are they? The shorter beings. The being, who was around 5'10" to 6 feet tall, said, "They are the workers, we are the teachers. We've been here since your beginning. We watch over you, humans. You have been given information you will remember when the time is right." His face was so beautiful, peaceful, loving, felt very protective of us. I then spoke with my friend, Ian, her mother, and the other friends. The next thing I remember was I was back in my body, and I thought, what a crazy dream. So this continues with this. Finding out, of course, it was not a dream. As I've often mentioned to people that have dreams where they feel they've been on spacecraft, and I often say to them, when did you, how long have you remembered that dream? And they may say 5 or 10 years. And then it's pretty obvious it's not a dream. She said the next morning at 8 o'clock, her phone rang. Her friend asked her what I remembered. And she said she and her mother remembered everything up in the ship. Her recall was identical. Her mother called, "What do you think of our dream?" My mind was blown. We compared the event. So these are some of her friends that actually remembered this. Finally, Frank called up. To this point, I believed this was a shared dream. Frank's account changed that. He said he was walking down the street at 2 a.m. He thought the light that came upon him was a truck with its high beams, but it was a small ship that picked him up. I asked him if he remembered what he said to me when we were in the small ship together. And he said in this same excitement, "This is awesome." Frank also said that when they dropped him off, he was 3 miles away from where they picked him up. He was annoyed that he had to walk a lot longer to get home. Every other person, with the exception of one, remembered what happened that evening. 2 were somewhat freaked out, but everyone had a life-changing experience. Only one person didn't remember. But again, there's more to this story. When Beth was on board, she was shown a species of plants. And she said, "And I believe we will be getting these mysterious plants very soon." Now, this is significant to what I'm going to lead you into. She said, "I didn't give much thought to the plants that were growing in the ship next to the waterfall. I just thought they were pretty. These are plants they'd gathered throughout the galaxy and universe and have modified them. I'm remembering that they use plant DNA in creating their craft. The walls glow, and this is because they're using DNA from the plants. that have the bioluminescence properties and also use some of their own DNA so that the craft interacts with the occupants. It's an extension of them. So if they want a chair, for instance, one will be created with intention. They will be gifting humanity with these plants that they have created. The sap will grow. There will be many different uses for these plants, from everyday practicality of creating light to healing. That's really significant. These plants were next to a waterfall, so I think if they don't directly give the plants to a person or scientist, we will find these amazing new species of plants somewhere where there are waterfalls. They will place them there so that we discover them, or simply hand them to us, pending our readiness to have full disclosure. And this is an image she's done of the being that was telling her about the plants. And these were the workers she saw in the cart. So there's more to this story. What Beth was really keen to find out, what was the message that she was given that she wasn't allowed to remember? And so we did a regression. And she found that she had a past life in Atlantis. The same soul team was on board their spacecraft. In other words, all those that were on the spacecraft, she remembered now, were there back in the time of Atlantis, before the fall of Atlantis. At that time, we saw many things in Atlantis that we knew were sick, and knew that we were being lied to. Those who spoke out were cast out and punished. The light workers were in the minority. The ones that stood up for truth and justice were in the minority. The fall occurred. The society was sick. We, the awake, knew that we were going to be destroyed if we didn't elevate our frequencies and stand up for sovereignty. But this time, I believe we will succeed. We will unite. The majority of us have pure spirit. There is a way of measuring our spirit frequencies. This time, our love, unity will push and carry us to the next level or dimension. It is so parallel. The exact same scenario as Atlantis is occurring right now. In Atlantis, we didn't complete our mission. She also found this script, the Codex Ora Linda. There is an ancient script that looks very familiar, she said, very close to how we used to write during the time of Atlantis. But there's still more to this story. On the information of recall of Atlantis from the astral, from 1989, she's been drawn through the astral to under the ocean in the Gulf of Mexico, just south of an Air Force base in Fort Walton, Florida. I would be pulled there out of body. I would go flying from my home straight into the water in the ocean. I'm seeing a portion of either a craft or a stargate. It's the same technology that I think we hid from ourselves until the time was right. I'm seeing the glyphs glowing now, and this object beginning to surface in the silt at the bottom of the ocean. A part of it is exposed now. The brown area around the glyph is supposed to be sandy silt. Our frequencies are rising, and our ancient tech is calling us to be found. Back to the tech, in my opinion, either a craft ark or a stargate were used in Atlantis. We will be discovering, or this tech will be finding us. Now, I need to state here that this was all new to me in terms of this space ark. I'd not heard of anything to do with that when I did the regression with Beth. However, since that time, I've come across more information. Activation, assisting humanity to awaken. Beside the ark becoming activated, I received an equation, Beth said, I believe was used to program it for waking up at this time. This equation is a sine wave or frequency, universal location, time change. Multiply the fractional number of the universal location divided by time, cross sine waves or frequency equals a change or activation. It's odd that I got this equation this way. I believe this is part of a grid of many ark ships that have been either under the oceans or hidden in land masses. They're all over the world. This particular one, for whatever reason, is calling me, she said. I have a group that will be remote viewing it with pure intention, asking if it needs help or has a message for us. I believe that all these artifacts, timepieces, knowledge vaults will be surfacing around the world. They will be used for the real history of our species. There is technology that will help humanity and Earth and propel us into the future timeline that we've only dreamt of. And what's interesting here is she's saying, I'm seeing a portal or stargate. I'm visualizing a large stargate that hovered above the water on a platform. These arcs have been in stasis waiting for this time. I don't know if we should go physically there or if connecting to it the way I have has been enough. I discovered that in Exopolitics Today, an interview with Dr. Sala, Alex Collier and Elena Danan discuss the latest intel regarding space arcs, extraterrestrial fleets. Alex and Elena contacts with extraterrestrials of the Andromeda Council and Galactic Federation are talking about these space arcs that are now activating due to human consciousness. And this information only came to my awareness after Beth and her story. And I'm not completely finished with that. Another whistleblower, JP whistleblower of Army Intelligence, talked about an ovoid space arc activated in the Ukraine. So this is what's interesting here. The arc or arc possesses exotic plant life. Russia seeks to control another smaller space arc located near the city of Kiev, according to JP. He states Russia already possesses a space arc in its own territory, which possesses exotic technology. JP describes another space arc in central Brazil. Remember, all this information came after Beth's information that I have just spoken about. All space arcs are being activated and form an integrated network that will eventually float into the sky in what will amount to a global disclosure event. He says that the arcs and the extraterrestrial fleet connected to them represent a benign force and will help humanity enter a new golden age. Beth, of course, mentioned the plants, and they will be gifting modified plants that grow. JP serves with the US Army, states and talks about an ovoid-shaped space arc under the Ukraine desert near the city of Kherson, which has been taken over by the Russian army. Over a number of years previously to this, I'd read a book called Transylvanian Sunrise. One of the authors is Peter Moon, and this is a sphinx they found in Romania, where some underground facility of ancient technology, and you've got some pictures of it here, what they found. They needed a certain consciousness to get in to see it, and it was left there by some ancient, we don't know, ancient ancestors, whether they're extraterrestrial or not, I don't know. But what's interesting about this, and I will show you how it all ties in, they found an ancient hall of records in Romania. An anomaly was found in the Buceti Mountains of Romania, a dome-shaped structure. A similar anomaly, by the way, was found in Iraq. 5 tables on each side of a room, some of them objects that appear to be technical tools. When approaching any of the tables, a holographic projection activates, showing aspects of a particular scientific field. The 3-dimensional images are perfect and very large, with a height of almost 2.5 meters. Other squares show projections of other beings and other celestial bodies. By tapping simultaneously 2 different squares, a complex scientific analysis shows the DNA of both beings and possibilities of compatibility between them. The remote viewing of Beth and her group of this, as well as the other location in the Gulf of Mexico. Beth saw these images and literally was blown away, because this is what she saw which was confirmed by her remote viewing. Missing the plants she saw perhaps in another chamber. Beth and her link to the group of remote viewers of the ark, and I'm spelling the ark another way here for a reason, in Romania. Beth was intrigued by what she was discovering as she looked into what her awareness had revealed. After you land in the proper chamber, possibly 30 feet down, you're in a shiny channel next to a large room. The room also had hieroglyphs on the walls, not Egyptian, but close. There are also crystals that have been programmed with our history and the gifts of tech. Think back now to what I was talking about, the crystal skulls, for example, and Lee Capitelli. We program these crystals and place them in writings for us to find. No one would be able to go there and investigate unless they bring you and want you to unlock it. I believe there are preserved beings down there. They are part of our civilization, possibly the beings that were pre-Atlantean, some Atlanteans. There is a guardian. There is almost definitely everything we need to know about our history down there, so we can catch up and find out the truth. And this is also what Beth said. I saw plants, and so did another viewer. I said, are they by a trickling underground waterfall, bioluminescent? Remember, she said that we were going to get these as a gift to us. These could possibly be one of the areas that we find these particular plants. And another viewer in that group said that there were plants down there that could heal humanity. I expanded and said they could mix the plant with their DNA, the beings to create their ships that are linked to them. The other viewer also saw preserved beings, but he went on to say that they are in stasis, potentially can become reanimated. So the latest remote view from Beth is this. The arcs were a combination of groups. The original peoples might have stories on this. The people on Earth before Atlantean times were more spiritual. Atlantis had open trade, society for ETs, extra-dimensional beings. The people before Atlantis remind her of what we visualize as Lemurians. I felt that AI was invited into the city. We observed corruption and change, but also a group of high integrity called Arcturians, with the science and capabilities to create capsules, ships, gates, to hide things that were precious. They teamed up with higher vibrational original people to create these arcs. Combined, we knew the Earth well. They knew the extra-dimensional tech needed. Regarding the beings observed in stasis and who placed them, it would be the humans on Earth with the Arcturians. When the beings on the ship said, you call us Arcturians, that's probably not what they call themselves. They think of themselves as guardians, teachers, protectors, and scientists. So why do we call Noah's Ark, or is it Ark? Why are we agreeing that these are arcs? The answer is there. It's tied to the name we gave the ones that helped us, the Arcturians. I also got the word, the life designers, and have a role on watching over them. Something I don't really know what it means, but EA in the word Earth has some feeling of a sort of life designer. That was a side glimpse. It was important, but you pronounce it EA. It would be interesting to ask the original peoples around the globe who helped them in the past. So just to give you a little bit more information on how this is all connecting, this remote viewing is from Tony Rodriguez and his RV group, which Beth is part of. The space craft Ark in the Gulf of Mexico, he had also remote viewed, was conscious. It was aware of him and felt benevolent. He observed life forms that had been in stasis being reactivated and grown. Estimated time 6 to 12 months to operate the craft. He also looked at Romania with his group, the large craft, a large, huge craft, he said, many feet down, beings in stasis plus a large pyramid. And he meant large pyramid, a guardian presence. It's a portal. Unusual glowing plants by a waterfall, plants similar to the ones Beth had observed on the spacecraft. Crystals under the Sphinx that are programmed and activating. Preserved ancient beings, aware that other such arcs are in other places globally. One entrance in the Sphinx, the US has control of. So the hidden message revealed by regression. To complete the mission not completed from a past life in Atlantis. The message revealed to Beth in regression, in our past life on Atlantis, she said, we failed. I know what they meant by we bring beautiful things to the planets. They bring humans and other species. They watch over us. They love us like children. They are our teachers. I don't know if I am one of them. I do know that my most recent life wasn't on Earth. I was on a spaceship. The beings felt like Arcturians, but they weren't blue. So here is the final message from the teachers who are the Arcturian Council. We are your parents, you are our children. To evolve is to choose correctly the love frequency above fear and greed, open hearts and unity. The darkness will try and divide. We need to wake the people up, show them they have a choice to serve for the greater good, not fear and ignorance. Earth will be part of the galactic community, no longer in fear, which is an illusion, to rise above it and see the lie. Surface to others and lead by example. Time is short, evolve and choose correctly. New Earth is bright, you have a place in the galactic future and we love you. The primary message I feel that's important in this presentation is our connection to what we call other timelines, other realities. And the reason that we've incarnated now is to complete whatever that connection is. If we've come in with a feeling of a mission or purpose, then it seems that that is very much part of the soul journey that we've chosen. And what's fascinating here, when people say, well, are we going to get some help? Not only are these star beings incarnating within in the human container, if you like, or the human biological body, they're also giving us the tools to help us make this shift, which I believe is imminent from everything that we're hearing here. I hope everyone found it interesting. I'm always trying to expand our awareness into how this is all coming together and to connect some of the dots, which I think are really important now to give us some hope and to give us a sense of focus, because it's very hard right now, isn't it, to hang on to that sometimes with everything that's going on the planet. So for me, it's really important to keep that theme of where are we going, even though in our hearts we know, but on another level, there's always the human side that finds it really difficult. And it's a really difficult time now. The energies are so chaotic, and there's so much that we're having to clear that sometimes it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But there is one, and we're being helped. And I hope that this presentation particularly is helping those realize that there's a lot going on behind the scenes, even if we don't fully know all of it. There is some major things going on. One of the things that I will say to you was I had a sense of this many years ago. I was told by a wonderful intuitive from England that there was a reason why the US went into Iraq, and it was not because of the weapons of mass destruction, but because there was ancient technology there that they didn't want Saddam Hussein to get his hands on. And interestingly, you know, that was the story, wasn't it? But if you remember, the museum in Baghdad was raided, and there was a lot of artifacts taken. And the reason why this is important is that there is I was told by this intuitive in England that it was because of this technology that Saddam Hussein had his hands on, and they were concerned that he would have access to it. And I remember thinking how incredible and how weird, almost sci-fi that was. But what I discovered when I asked someone in intelligence that I knew at the time, and I said, is there any credibility to that, about this ancient technology that's they're worried about? And he said to me something very clear. Don't ever talk about it, Mary. Don't mention it in anything. Whatever you do, don't say any more about that. And this is quite a few years ago now, mind you, so I am saying something. And I realized then that was something more than what was being told. And of course, now what I've discovered is that we may have these arcs and this technology in many countries. And I've been told there may be, certainly there's one in Australia as well as other countries, but also other technology that the US now has. So it wasn't such a strange thing as I thought it was then, because it seems to have come to pass. Yes, you know, Pine Gap, I think you mean there, Chris, and other places like that. But there's no doubt there are portals, there are stargates, there are these arcs, it appears, very much like they are all over the globe and are being activated by human consciousness. So we're in for some interesting times ahead, I think, without doubt. The interesting thing with these arcs is they don't activate unless you're of a particular consciousness. So there's enough, obviously, with higher consciousness that are able to get in there, but they will have, there is what appears to be guardians that are also protecting this technology. So I'm not sure how that is all going to work, but as soon as I get more information on it, I'll do my best to let you know. But for me, it's interesting that it's being corroborated from a number of sources, which gives it a lot, to me, a great deal of tangibility. And we're going to know pretty soon anyway, because of the information within before 12 months, considerably less. There seems to be a time where all of this will come to pass. So we'll know soon enough, I think, if it has the veracity I believe it has. The portal, I think, the difference between an arc and a portal, the arc is technology, it's a craft in many cases, a living consciousness craft, and the portals are what we use to go to other dimensions or other parts of this planet from one place to another. But certainly the most important thing here is, when we're finding it so difficult on this planet right now, is to know there is an end time to this, and there is going to be that shift. And I think more than anything, I want to convey that to everyone is, you know, hang in there, even though it seems very dark at the moment.